One for this upcoming pilot writing course that will take you from idea to a finished draft of a brand new original pilot in just 6 weeks. So 6 class meetings, including this one today. And you will be writing either half hour or full hour. And you should have a complete script by the end of it. So let's look at our first couple slides here, which are just going to tell you the basics of using microphones on Discord. If you're watching this on one of our other streaming channels, such as Facebook, Twitch, or YouTube, you can still comment and we can see your text comments, so we're glad to take a look at those. But if you want to interact with the class, make sure that you sign up on Scriptcamp and join our Discord server, so scriptcamp.net, and you can find the membership link to sign up for a free trial here. Let's look at just this basics of the microphone. Just click that small gray microphone icon in the bottom left if you need to mute or unmute yourself. And then be ready, if you're in a Scriptcamp course, even if it's the very first week, be prepared to speak out loud and to talk about your ideas and to answer questions and to start to practice taking notes, because this is a really big part of working in the industry. So just check that mic icon if you find yourself not being able to be heard. That's the main thing to worry about there. So Scriptcamp, if you don't know, this is a screenwriting community that's going to take you from concept to idea to draft of brand new original features and TV pilots. That is what we're focused on writing, with new courses being added for things like playwriting and novel writing, which is coming up soon. There's lots of free classes, but also events and workshops for paid members. These are going to be our boot camps, which this is one of them. We have 3 boot camps running concurrently most of the time. We also have other paid options or paid opportunities, such as the Writer's Lab, which is sort of like office hours on Saturdays, where you can come and get any questions you have answered or any topics that you would like to hear more about, or you can bring up to 5 pages of something you're working on for review. So there's plenty of benefits to being a member, and we hope that you will at least check out the options, scriptcamp.net/membership. If you've not already signed up, you can do so right now, and start your 2-week free trial of Unlimited, which gives you access to every class we do, every course, every boot camp, and the yearly option is now available too, which is about 40% off. So let's look at just one brief slide about me. My name is Connor. I'm the main instructor here, and I have been a repped Hollywood writer since 2017, with a recent thriller script set up at a major production company in town. I'm specializing in action, horror, and thriller, but really write a wide variety of genres, and I'm starting to branch off into publishing books as well. I teach the boot camps, the weekly Writers Lab, and I'm doing a guest spot currently on the Sunday Fantasy Writers Group, which meets at 5 o'clock Sundays Pacific Time. We have several boot camps going on right now, including Short Film Boot Camp. That's Saturdays 12 to 2 if you want to write and finish a complete draft of a 1 to 10 page short film in just 4 weeks. That's going towards its 3rd week, so it's a little late to join at that point, but you can always review those earlier videos if you want to get just a refresher, a reminder, or to see, to go through that course on your own later. Feature Bootcamp and TV Pilot are the other ones that are always sort of cycling. Our current Feature Bootcamp is Sundays at 11 a.m., and our Pilot Bootcamp is this one, Fridays at 5 p.m. These are all in Pacific Time. Novel Bootcamp is starting September 17th at our 12 to 2 slot, and you'll write an entire novel in just 12 weeks, so that should be super cool. We're focusing on sci-fi, fantasy, and horror novels, but no matter what kind of book you want to write, as long as you set your goals reasonably to, a realistic number of words, then you should be able to write and finish maybe perhaps your first ever novel in just 12 weeks. We have a bunch of other groups and genre-specific clubs that you can see on the right there, and you can start your own too. So this is more than just our core classes. This is also a community that is just centered around writing professionally and being, taking those steps towards trying to write professionally for film and TV in Hollywood. So we have these classes are 2-hour weekly courses. It's going to be a different number of weeks per class, but this is like sort of college-style online classes, but all interactive and with lots of participation and activities. You can follow along with our step-by-step practical method and try to just write your script through without worrying way too much if it's going to be a masterpiece. You have to see this as going to the gym and lifting those weights in order to build the skills that you need. So you can enroll scriptcamp.net/classes to buy the course on its own, or you can go to scriptcamp.net/membership and you can sign up for that free trial for Unlimited. I think we've talked about promotional stuff enough. Last thing is that you can just also get coverage. If you want to get feedback on one of your scripts, you can either post it in one of our many channels that are for that, or if you want to buy coverage from me, members get a big discount off of that. So you can check that out at scriptcamp.net/coverage, where you can also buy things like a visual lookbook for your project that you're trying to direct, or any reason that you're putting together some kind of visual reference for your script. We have services for that too. All right, anything else to announce or promotionally, Nacho, before we get into this course?
Yeah, just the biggest thing is if you are interested, if you plan to enroll, but you haven't signed up yet on the website, all you need to do is vote yes in the poll. You can get immediate access to all the bootcamp channels and start getting feedback and help with your TV pilot project. So we're going to post a poll, and you just vote yes. You can get immediate access to join the bootcamp channels.
Thanks, Nacho. Yep, so if you want to find that chat on Discord, you're going to have to just mouse over where it says General Chat, click that small white word bubble that says Open Chat, and then you leave your text, comments, and questions. And I think we should also be able to see, most of the time, we can see comments from people on YouTube and places like that as well. Anyway, but thanks for being here. This is going to be fun. This is it's a brand new session, and we're always trying to iterate and learn things from our previous versions of these that we've done, and just get better and better at running this. So we're always taking feedback if you have suggestions for our suggestion box channel. But this is the kind of the overview of the course here, and this is the way we've been doing it for a while now. We start with our week 0, which is going to be just an overview of the entire class, talking about some of the basics of writing for TV in the US, and then trying to start to nudge you towards figuring out what your idea is. Because you're going to have to commit to writing one script as soon as possible in order to start brainstorming for that one and start putting that project together. So this week is about why this story. You're going to try to narrow down to one of your perhaps many different ideas and try to pick the best one that's going to be something you can execute within this 6 weeks and you can remain excited about, and it will get you across the finish line. Next week is going to be focused on outlining. So once we have that core kernel of the idea and the log line really solid, then you can start to figure out what are those main plot events going to be in the general order and shape that they're supposed to go in. Then week 3 is going to be scene cards, where we expand that previous broader outline into a much more detailed one that's going to give you a full paragraph for every scene, so you know what's going to happen on every page of your script, giving you a very comprehensive roadmap through that story. Week 4 is first act, week 5 is second act, week 6 is third act, and during that span, you'll have to write just 1/3 of your script every week. Notice the first entire half of this program is planning and outlining, and that second entire half is writing it and executing it, and you'll be finished by October 7th. Any questions before we jump in? Either on voice or on text? Hold that thought. Let me grab my water bottle. All right, I did not hear any questions, so we will just dive in and...
Can you hear me?
Oh, hi, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Good. I was just wondering, I'm only just jumping before you go on. I'm struggling to come up with an idea at this point. I would like to tag along and follow all those steps. I guess I know that was what we were supposed to sort of figure out last week when we were talking about some steps to sort of conceptualize something. But I mean, just would you just suggest just start with a character or start with a concept? I feel like maybe a character might be a good start to, I guess, just to something real quick. Any quick tips for just coming up with something instantaneously, I guess?
Sure. I mean, so I guess the first question is just, what have you got? And if you have I guess you have to ask, do I have ideas for characters? Do I have ideas for situations? Or do I have ideas for types of experiences that I want to create? And that's what you will try to, I guess, just write down whatever you have in a sketchbook. You don't even have to have a title of the show yet. But the idea of the sketchbook is just to try to just figure out what your ideas are and put them onto paper. And then I think you'll have to see if you can try to combine the things that you have. So if you have 3 ideas for characters, you have 3 ideas for different genres that you think are interesting to maybe explore, you're going to have to start just picking your favorite among those and gravitating towards one over the other, and then trying to fit those characters into that box. And I see it as it's more of the process of trying to figure out a story that works and that gets you excited, and that's really all you're looking for. I think that it doesn't have to be like incredibly original. It doesn't have to be brilliantly unique. We're just looking for something that you think that you spark to pretty quickly. And I find that a nice way to do that is by picking some newer, fresher idea that's recently occurred to you, or that's just kind of like grabbed your interest recently. Maybe some topic that you've been researching a lot lately, or you've been watching a lot of one kind of show. If you're like, I've been watching nothing but, Regency-era romance TV shows for the last year, I'm obsessed with them, then maybe try writing one of those, but with your own sort of unique twist on it. So yeah, look at things like just the ideas that you have, look at the genres and things that you've been watching lately, like look what you yourself have been gravitating towards, and that's probably going to be a genre that you know pretty well already, and you know what's been done in that genre, so you'd be able to more easily just take one or two things, twist them a little bit. I don't know, let's say you like cop shows. I love cop shows. I've never seen a cop show where the main character is, I don't know, an alien, right? So you can try to just find a genre that you know well, and add that little twist to it, and then you'll be able to find a pretty quick unique spin on it. Do any of those tools sound like they would help you?
Yeah. Let's go to that.
Sure. Yeah, so I think that if you're still struggling on your basic idea, start with something that you know. And you have to, I think everyone has different areas of interest and different things that we know about. Whether that's an expertise, or whether that's a hobby, or whether that's sort of just an area of study. Everyone has stuff that they know. And, whether it's just you should follow your own fascination, I guess, is what I'm sort of trying to get at here. We're not trying to force yourself to, if you never watch military stuff, and if you've never seen a documentary about the military, you don't really like war movies, then you shouldn't be trying to write military war movies and stuff. You should try to pick something that is what you would choose to watch if you could watch anything. If you could just take a magic remote and click a button and say, I'd really like to watch that right now, ask yourself, what is that thing? Because you're going to have to sort of live in the world of that thing and that emotional tone and that stuff for the next 6 weeks. And so you have to choose it, somewhat carefully. You have to be calculating, like, what's the kind of feeling that if I lingered in that for 6 weeks, it wouldn't ruin that thing for me. Like, it wouldn't. I want to pick something that I can explore and be excited about. And by the time 6 weeks is done, I won't be so attached to it that I will feel the need to get it perfect. You want to typically be able to write something as a nice period of practice and then move on from there. And that's how I often suggest thinking about bootcamp scripts, is just these are bricks that you must place in the long road to being a writer, so don't worry if any one brick or another is absolutely perfect. Move beyond the idea that something has to be good at all, whatever good even means, and remember that we are just trying to lay down bricks and trying to build that road to being a writer. The yellow brick road, if you will. Any other questions on the schedule or on the bootcamp essentials before we jump into it? All right, let's get going. Let me just double check the text chat. Okay, looks like we're good. Let's get started. So, this is an overview of this one class, and we're going to start with those ground rules and suggestions to help you pick the kinds of scripts that you would probably be good for a bootcamp class. We'll then get into loglines, which we may have updated ones from last week, so we can take a look at if you have one that is a bit more developed, or if you have a new one as well. We can try to help you decide and try to narrow down, so probably don't post more than 2 or 3 loglines today, but you're going to want to definitely have your idea chosen by the end of this class, and you're going to want to have your logline as fully formed as possible by next week. So we can talk sketchbooks, and I will show you an example of a sketchbook that I'm putting together as something I might or might not write, but I just decided to start assembling as an example to show the kinds of ideas that you're going to want to include and the way that we're going to go about designing a cast for your show, because so much of TV is based on that setting and that cast. We say the interesting world and the fascinating people that populate it, and therefore you want to make sure to put that early world building detail into a TV sketchbook. It doesn't all have to be plot, plot, plot. You want to be designing an array of characters that have an interesting web of dynamics between them. What do we mean by dynamics between characters? And can somebody give us some strong examples of ones that you like? I think we're hearing a loud sound coming from someone's mic. If you would just make sure to keep your mics muted so we don't hear that interference noise. Thank you. Can somebody give us some examples of interesting character dynamics? Go ahead.
Just opposites. Body cop. The two people with the
Sure, two characters that have a conflict between them, or some kind of, they're opposite ends of a spectrum. You said like buddy cop, so for instance we might have in Lethal Weapon you have a one by the book cop and you have one completely crazy cop, and by sticking them together the partnership becomes more interesting and it creates the potential for unlimited drama throughout those characters' lives. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good example. Anyone else have some ideas, or you can give a specific movie or a specific show if you want. Other interesting character dynamics or ones that you've enjoyed in the past?
Yeah, let's go with the Wire D, right? He comes back out of prison. He has to sell drugs again because this is literally the only thing he can do, but he wants to do it quote unquote the right way. He doesn't want to be brutal about it, all of these things, but he's involved in this very brutal system. He has this very brutal uncle that runs the cartel, the gang, and basically this is a clash of philosophies that will resolve by the end of season 2. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm sure The Wire I've only seen one season of, but it has a very complex web of character dynamics there, considering that some characters are on the crime side, some characters are on the law enforcement side, and some characters are on both. So they have to sort of be different people around each other in different ways, which is a fascinating dynamic that you get in a lot of crime dramas where when we're talking about dynamics, we're talking about the ways that people behave and the ways that they clash off of each other. So we're talking character relationships here. Some really interesting ones are ones with different power balances to them. So for instance, if we're talking about a mentor and an apprentice kind of vibe to a show, something like Breaking Bad, for the first 4 seasons or so, we have the master chemist, and you have him, he's trying to mentor this kid who doesn't know anything about chemistry, but knows all about the crime. So the fact that they have those two skills that offset the other one, they both provide something that the other one lacks, and they both rely on each other, but also it puts them constantly at each other's throat. We like to see character dynamics that have they have multiple dimensions to them, and ways that people behave that aren't necessarily just what we see every day. And that's what we should be focusing on in the early sketching stages of your TV show, is coming up with fascinating characters and the worlds that they will be living in. So don't worry, don't get too hung up on the logline of the pilot yet. You should be looking more at the series logline at this early of a stage and trying to populate your world with fascinating people that you might be able to theoretically draw several different pilots out of that arrangement of little puppets that you have, because if you have a strong enough set of characters, then you would be able to, this is supposed to be a show, so we would be able to generate multiple episodes from this same setup in theory. And if you ever write documentation like a Bible for your show, then that's exactly what you'll be doing. But we don't really cover that stuff. It's more important to work on that, to focus on the pilot rather than focus on, I need to make a Bible for this early show. Just try to you gotta write a lot of pilots to get good at writing pilots, basically. But I'll get more into character dynamics as the class goes on. I just wanted to tell you that early on to make sure that as you are working in your sketchbook, which I do encourage you do from the very beginning of the class, and you have the sketchbook open and be fiddling with stuff and adding new ideas for characters and questions you have and things you notice and things you're wondering about. I recommend an active approach to being in the class of that nature, because that is just making best use of your time. There's, you can do whatever you want. If you really want to work out or ride a bike or play a video game while you're in the class, that's fine. But I think that just having the sketchbook open is a good way to get the ideas going and to sort of figure out where those early hurdles are going to be while you still have time to ask and resolve those questions, rather than waiting until the week between classes. But it's totally up to you. That's just my recommendations there. So what else? We'll look at time slot and format and television genres. I think we went over a lot of this last week, so I don't want to spend way too much time on just fundamentals. I'd rather spend more of the class time talking ideas and trying to make sure that everyone is on the right sort of page and knows what they're doing, and we're giving you that boost that you need in order to get started on your show. But we will look at just a brief recap of time slot and format, TV genre, premise versus status quo, these we might call the continuity modes of TV, and then we will have time for some feedback on your idea. So be prepared to speak out loud and to articulate and to answer questions and to take notes in a graceful way that's receptive to feedback, and be working on these feedback receiving skills as the class goes on. If you are not good at receiving feedback, there's no chance that you'll be able to work on a TV staff, because that's such a fundamental part of the job at every single stage. We'll look for a few minutes just at what a showrunner is looking for in terms of the premise. But again, we should mostly be looking for premises that work and that I can get excited about and that I can finish within 6 weeks, rather than I've got to write something that the market is going to buy, or that's going to get me signed, or that's going to get sold, or anything like that. And then we'll have lots of time for these questions, and we'll have just like a brief QA at the end if there's anything. But feel free to ask questions as we go using that text chat in the general of the Discord. All right. Any questions on class overview? Okay, let's get started. So, I've mentioned before, don't worry way too much if this pilot is good.
Hello?
Whoa! Sorry, that was very
Sorry.
loud.
Sorry, like my mic was like double muted. I just had a quick question. In terms of like signing up for the next week, do we do that through the Discord or do we do that through the meetup?
You can do that on the website, which is scriptcamp.net. And go ahead, Nacho.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so if you scroll up, there's a poll. If you vote yes, you can get immediate access. And then you just need to go on the website. When you have the chance, you can go to scriptcamp.net/membership to sign up for membership, or scriptcamp.net/classes for just like a single class.
All right, thanks for that.
Wait, and when
go
you
ahead.
say a poll, is it through the Discord or is it also through the Scriptbook Camp?
Yes, in Discord. Are you able to see the text channel where to type? To click open chat, or if you're on a phone, you can swipe right to left.
Yeah. Like sorry, this is my first time using Discord, where it says stuff like server info, discussion.
Yeah, so you're going to want to scroll down
Okay.
to where it says general chat, and you'll see that's the voice channel. Then when you mouse over that, there should be
Okay.
a small white word bubble that you can click on to open the chat. I know it's kind of hard to find all this stuff at first, so we can also just send you a message with the link that you need if you can't find it.
I think I found it. The invite to stream link.
No, so it'll be above that. So the general chat is the voice channel. If you mouse over that, you should see a small icon that says open chat. I think that we can, Nacho just tagged you in it, so you should see a small red 1 pop up. Maybe not.
No.
No, not yet. Okay, that's okay. Are you on a phone or a tablet or on a computer?
I'm on a computer.
On a computer. Okay, so maybe Nacho can send you a message, and then you can click the link in that. It'll be a private message that'll show up in the top left corner of your screen.
Okay.
All right, we'll do that. Sorry, it's confusing. I know it's tough to you'll figure it out, but it takes a little getting used to it.
Thanks for your patience.
Yeah, no problem. And thanks for joining. We are always glad to have new people. This course is open to all skill levels. Once we figure out how to find everything on Discord, it gets a lot easier. So we're happy to have you guys here. Let's. Where was I in the slideshow? That's right. So we're talking pilots being finished in 6 weeks. Oh, last thing I'll say is don't worry. Also, if you don't get signed up by the end of class, you can you have up until the next class meeting to sign up if you need to. Will this script be fantastic? Don't worry too much about it. We're trying to just get script after script after script done, because this is like lifting those weights. And your first couple scripts are just not going to be good if these are your first scripts you've ever written. And even then, your first, 10 scripts, so you can't count on them being any good, because no one's first painting is going to be hung in a museum for the most part. And it's a similar thing. It's like if you watch somebody play the piano for 5 seconds, you can usually get a pretty good sense of how long they've been playing. It's the same thing with a script, and it's like your first couple you won't have these skill sets to put together as strong of a story that fits exactly in this very specific and challenging format in order to, you're not going to have a career right away, and that's okay. Just accept that this takes years to become good enough at in order to do that professional stuff, and just slow down and take a step back and say, I'm going to really invest that time to getting really good at the mechanics of crafting 30 to 60 minute stories before I worry about moving to Los Angeles, or getting a job on a TV staff or any of these things. Those things will come later, but for now, I think you should just focus on writing a script, finishing it, taking notes and revising it, then moving on to the next one. And we're going to just try to establish a consistency in that so that you're able to do one after the other, and that's sort of what these boot camps are intended to help you do. And many people find a lot of success taking another boot camp after the first one, and then after that one, so that they can, doesn't have to be directly subsequent, but they chain them together to some extent and just get better and better at the process every time. So that is my recommendation. It's always okay to jump in a course a little late or to miss a few. There's no grades or anything like that. We're just trying to get you on the course to finishing these scripts and building those skills. So here's some ground rules on what I suggest for what to choose. I'm not doing true stories, anthologies, soap operas, rewrites, or adaptations. So if this is for brand new, original, half-hour or full hour-long pilots. And that means that these are, or the reason why I should say is simply because we're trying to pick ideas that require less research. Writing something in 6 weeks is not always very easy, especially if you have, full-time job or family or things like that. So we'd like to try to focus on things that will be simplest to complete in this time frame. That means I recommend against writing time travel stories. We've never seen someone successfully able to complete a time travel story in the span of a boot camp. You can take that as a challenge if you really want, but I would recommend against it. And just be careful of anything that's going to be really difficult to keep straight on the page, things like clones, parallel universes, scripts that heavily rely on different timelines or flashback sequences. You want to usually, especially if you're just getting going at this, tell a beginning, middle, end, linear story in ideally half-hour format, because it's just simply half as much work as writing a full hour would be. You don't have to today, but if you're going to be in classes after this one, after the intro week of any boot camp, to use your real name or use something that's your middle name or a nickname or anything that is a real name rather than a screen name. So yeah, try to pick some new, fresh, interesting, different idea that's just going to keep you excited, and you're going to be able to finish in 6 weeks. And something that you are not that invested in, and that not something you've been trying to write your entire life. You don't want to be writing some family member's life story or something really important to you. You want to actually pick something that is splashy and gets your attention, and you're just like, wouldn't that be cool? That's sort of the best boot camp script. And then just accept that maybe it won't be that cool once it's done, but I have to write the bad ones to get to the good ones. So today we'll be reviewing a little bit of Logline, and we'll be looking at Loglines if you guys have some that you have finished. Hopefully by the end of today, we will have really strong Loglines for everyone's project if we can. Then we'll be talking also a lot about Sketchbook, which is that one document where you'll be keeping all your notes and organizing all your thoughts related to each movie or to each TV show as you work on them, as you go. And I will look at some examples from mine today, and I'll sort of give you an idea of how to start building out a cast and establishing those fascinating points of conflict and dynamics within the world. Then we're going to look next week at story beats, which is the events that happen in the story and the rough order that they go in. You can already be getting some ideas for these things and forming the rough shape of them in your sketchbook even now, but we're going to actually try to write out a 1 to 3 page more or less story beat outline for the pilot next week. Then we move from there into story beats. As I said, 1 paragraph for each scene. We then go to that's scene cards, full paragraph for each scene. Then finally we use this term go to pages, which means you actually start formatting the script, writing all the staging and dialogue. So you will need to do tons of planning before we even get to that point. Don't worry about downloading Final Draft or whatever right away. We're mostly going to be working in Google Docs. We only want to be sharing Google Docs links or PDFs on the server. Don't be sending Word documents simply because many people don't have the Word files or Word software on their computer by default. And just this is the easiest way to make sure everyone's able to read your work and to see it. So Google Drive links, when you share them, make sure to edit those sharing settings so that anyone with the link can view them as well. So that's the process. If I'll check the chat for any questions on that so far, but that is going to be the same for whatever you're writing. I'm always using the same process, whether it's a pilot, a TV show, a musical, a movie, a book, whatever. I'm always using these exact steps, and I encourage you you don't have to use my exact steps and accept my exact, ways of doing everything. This is sort of just meant to put you on the track to figuring out, I have to do these things differently as part of my specific way of doing this. And this is to give you any sort of structure and organization to this so that you can find your own. But if you don't know what else to do, or if you're struggling to finish things, then try this out and give it a good honest try before you decide it doesn't work for you. I think that TV writing especially is so based on organization, because when you're on a staff, you're going to have to coordinate with many other people on that staff, with a hierarchy of producers and showrunners, and just keeping everyone on the same page is so important. So you need to be able to keep yourself on the same page before anything else. So you need to build a method that you would be able to clearly articulate and explain, and you try to use that same method every time, and make this part of your routine, make this part of your habit, and just be trying to write several scripts a year. All right, questions before we proceed? Any of the ground rules? All right, let's proceed. Oh, unless we have a question, go ahead. Thought I heard something. Nope, never mind. It was just a ghost. All right, so Sketchbook, let's get right into this. Go to your Google Docs, and you're going to want to open a new blank document if you've not already done this, and entitle it the name of the show and then Sketchbook. If you don't have a name for it, or you're trying to gather different ideas and decide between them, just call it Pilot Sketchbook, and through the rest of the class you'll be revising that logline and adding unsorted ideas to the sketchbook with no real filter or wrong answers, because there's no right or wrong way to really do this. It's just a place to collect all your notes and concepts, ideas for characters, and all the early pre-writing work that you're doing before you actually move into go to pages, as we say. So you're going to want to pitch a bunch of ideas to yourself in terms of write down everything that comes to your mind about this idea, the kind of comps that you might want to compare this to. So comps are these other shows that you're saying, my show is going to be kind of like that, you know. If we're going to say you're going to do like a, I don't know, let's do a spy comedy set in outer space. Spies in space, so your comps might be Archer meets Star Trek, right? That would be cool. I've never seen a spies in space show. Somebody should write that. But so you are going to want to narrow down the focus of what you're doing. Try not to have a million comps. Just 2 comps should be what you finally settle on and decide on. You can write down a couple ideas for other ones, but you're trying to just decide how to communicate what your aims for the project are. So that way, if you say it's going to be Archer meets Star Trek, people are going to think, okay, spies in space, and it's going to be funny. If you did not intend it to be funny, then Archer would not have been one of your comps. And so people are sometimes going to be judging your work based on what they think you're trying to create. So make sure that you're picking your comps carefully, and that you are allowing your audience to picture what it's supposed to be before they open up to page 1. So in your sketchbook, also include your ideas for maybe themes of the story, or if you have some idea of what the story is kind of trying to say at its core. We call this the dramatic argument, and this is going to be something that you can actually start at a very early stage in the process if you have an idea of what the kind of movie is, quote, about. This isn't super important if you don't have this, because this is also something that can emerge more organically from the process of simply realizing it out. Like, if you simply tell a story, I say that narrative is inherently persuasive writing, because no matter what you write, it's going to be making some kind of point, whether you really even intend it to be or not. And so, while it's best to have some kind of point, you sometimes need to finish that first draft in order to figure out what to orient the point around, and how to refocus in the subsequent drafts around just like bringing that theme to the forefront and cutting everything away that doesn't fit into that. So you don't actually have to have a super strong idea of what this is going to be about in a bigger sense, capital A, about beforehand. If you're like, I just think it'd be cool if there were spies in space, that's a perfectly fine reason to write that as a pilot, and also a pretty simple way of explaining what the show is and getting someone interested in that thing. So I think simpler is better. High concept does not mean more complicated. High concept is spies in space. It means more elemental and simple. This thing meets that thing that's not exactly like the first thing. And we're going to be able to envision what the show would be based on just those 2 comps, or that collision of those 2 unalike ideas. So you're going to be including pictures and video links in the sketchbook as well, and anything else that's just going to get your memory or jog your ideas and get your gears turning, or however you might want to say it. So we're going to look at a sketchbook that I'm working on. I'm not actually that far into it, but this is I started putting this together as an example to show the kinds of things that you might want to include. So this is for a show that I am considering writing. All right, at some point, I've actually written like 3 versions of this before, and so this might end up being a book, or maybe like a series of short stories perhaps, but I decided to put together what would be the half-hour pilot version of Knave. And Knave is a dark comedy set in a medieval castle. I describe it as Fleabag meets The Favorite. So this is going to be like a very snarky, sarcastic, kind of like fourth wall breaking dark comedy set in medieval times that follows a court jester, because I've always wanted to see a TV show that focused on the actual day-to-day interesting things that court jesters got up to and the ways that they were able to kind of move behind the scenes and manipulate what's going on in the kingdom behind the, in the curtain and in the shadows of the court. So we're going to be following a jester. This is going to be called Knave. Let's look at some of the basics that we're including here. So we're starting with our comps. We also have our continuity format, 30-minute status quo, and your genres. This is dark comedy / period piece drama. So, we are going to want to find no more than 2 different genres to stick together. I don't care if you have cowboys shooting lasers in a medieval space planet. We probably shouldn't describe something as an action, adventure, fantasy, western, sci-fi. Just pick 2 of those things that are most relevant, and you describe the emotional experience of what it is that we're getting into as best that you can. So this is a dark comedy set in medieval times. That's the basics here. Let's look at the series logline and none of these things are perfect or final. This is just a sketchbook, so I can just write down an okay version of this and then develop it as I go. So I've written down just these kind of placeholders. Series logline. A manipulative court jester secretly pulls the strings to keep things running smoothly in the court of a foolish king. Alright, so we have in the series logline an overview of what the whole show is kind of about. We don't need to get into the exact specifics of the plot events. We are trying to give us the main character, the world that they live in, and a hint at one of the sort of central dynamics. So based on this, we have 2 main characters. We might look at them as the hero and the villain, although the Knave's relationship with the king is a little more nuanced and complicated than a simple villain, as I think we'll see in the early pages of the sketchbook. But we've still highlighted that central relationship right there in the series logline. And that's going to sort of help, that one sentence is going to help us form the basis of and also communicate the idea behind the hook of the show. So let's look at pilot logline. So remember, we have 2 different loglines with TV. Pilot. The Knave develops insomnia, not amnesia. The Knave develops insomnia and stumbles upon a conspiracy to overthrow the king brewing amidst the night staff of the castle. A plot he must infiltrate and neutralize. Right? And I'm being a little coy with the ending of that one. I wouldn't actually recommend doing that, so I'm probably actually going to just take that off. But I like the idea that we're suggesting that the Knave's job is to keep things running, his self-imposed job is to keep things running smoothly in the castle. Sometimes that means supporting the king and acting in his best interests, and sometimes that means subverting those best interests. And so that's why I wanted to hint at this little question of, yeah, of course he has to, stop this scheme from tearing the kingdom apart, right? Or does he? He has to sort of evaluate on a case-by-case basis what the best way to keep things running is. So I'm just going to cut that coyness just for the purposes of showing you a clear pilot logline, though. So this is going to be a half-hour show where every time is a self-contained story where we have a beginning, middle, and end. We're not building up to larger plot events, at least in this current conception of it. But I think that we can see that that's the difference between our continuity formats. We have status quo like this, where everything's resolved by the end of the episode, and then we have a premise-based shows. If I were to write this as a premise show, I would write it like this: 30-minute premise. And those are going to be following much longer stories, much like the first chapter of a movie. Though you're not going to get to write the rest of that story, remember, you are not going to really have opportunities to write more than just the pilot, because people aren't really going to read beyond just the pilot. So anything that is really cool and that's you're intending for later on in the show, or off in the distance, or later seasons of the show, or spin-offs of the show, it's just not going to, it's almost certainly not going to happen. So you have to front load all the cool stuff possible that you can in the pilot. Any questions so far?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead.
I've been following, just taking notes, but it sounds like you've got some notes that are on the board that people are watching. Am I doing something wrong?
No, so there's a video that you can follow along with if you, in the general chat, if you mouse over my name is Conor K, you should see a red button that says the word live.
Yes.
And if you click that, you can join our video presentation and watch along with us.
Oh, okay.
Hopefully that works for you.
It's coming up, so thank you.
Sure, no problem.
Gotcha. All right.
Any other questions? So let's add some things to Knave. I mean, this is not a show. I'm not actually sure if I'm going to write this yet, but I think it would just be fun to start to brainstorm some possible ideas of what we could do with this, just by way of demonstration. I'm going to show you what I have already, and then I'm just going to add a couple sketches for characters and stuff, and this is like the kind of things that you guys should be having in your sketchbooks. Okay, so I have just the basics of the idea kind of written out right here. An unnamed court jester who hobbles around on arthritic legs lurks in the shadows of the court and uses his position to advise the king and try his best to keep things running well while he stays out of the spotlight. But the king is a blowhard, drunkard, macho man who never backs down from a perceived slight or challenge, so think like Johnny Bravo type of personality, and so the knave is forced to undermine him at every turn for the good of everyone. That's kind of the heart of the show, and just expressed in one paragraph. So this task requires viciousness that the knave takes some pride in utilizing. I think that at certain points the knave actually has to get a little bit scary, and that's why I think that it's interesting to have us not really give us the character's name. I think that he should remain a little enigmatic to the audience, and that's why Fleabag was one of my comps. The way that the main character stays a little bit mysterious to us, and sometimes a little bit unnerving to us, kind of fascinates me. So I have some ideas of what would happen in the plot, but you don't actually have to have any of these ideas yet. I have some sketches on Act 1, I have some sketches on Act 2. I mean, I know the basics of the first story will be stumbling upon this conspiracy amongst the night staff of the castle, so I know that Act 1 is going to be, we establish the main character's normal life, we find something that breaks it, he develops insomnia, he then, as a result of that, he stumbles upon this conspiracy amidst the night staff of the castle, and then as we move into Act 2, he's going to decide to try to infiltrate this group and find a way to dissolve it from the inside. So that's the basis of our pilot story. Let's look at some ideas for characters and start defining some dynamics in the world of Knave. So I like the idea that our sort of central cast is going to be essentially the royal family and their advisors and the people around them. This is kind of like Game of Thrones, but we never leave the castle to go do giant battles and stuff. This is more of like a comedic take on what it would require to keep a kingdom running day by day if it was run by complete idiots. So we have our main character, the Knave. I don't have names for any of these people yet, so you don't actually have to either. Don't get hung up on the names. We have the Foolish King. That's going to be our kind of central relationship for the show, because the Knave jesters have this interesting job where they're intended to communicate to the king certain things that they can break in a more jocular way in an attempt to control the king's reaction to these things. Like he can break bad news in a way that keeps the king in a good mood, stuff like that. So it's a very tense dynamic between them at times, because the way that the jester tells him about things will actually affect the actions the king takes. So I'm seeing some interesting ideas for character dynamics there. I think we have to have a queen. That's probably somebody who's going to not trust the knave. And I'm starting to already think of some interesting dynamics here, because if the queen is just as crafty as he is, perhaps she could be one of our main antagonists, whereas the king is more like a buffoon who always is, he's fighting war, trying to challenge people to fights over insults that he perceives, and he's always, getting the whole kingdom into trouble because he, gets in a fist fight with an ambassador or something. Whereas the queen would like to manipulate her husband for different reasons, so she's always clashing with the knave, and they're always going to be butting heads. And then we can let's add a princess character as well. So this is going to be one of the daughters of the this central couple here. And I want to have a different dynamic in place, so I'm going to pick somebody who, let's say, admires the knave. And I'm always connecting them back to the main character. So we have first somebody who that main character works with. Then we have somebody that the main character fights with. Then we have somebody that the main character is admired by and perhaps even mentors. So that's how you can start to think of what are the roles that these characters are going to fulfill. By contrast to the main character is going to help you find those interesting points of conflict and difference in their dynamics. Do we have a question?
Yeah, sorry. I'm just sorry. I'm just struggling to follow a little bit, going quite fast. I just was wondering if you could repeat your logline for me, just so I can follow. Just struggling to visualize it. Not a bit quick for me.
Okay, so the series logline is: a manipulative court jester secretly pulls the strings to keep things running smoothly in the court of a foolish king. And the pilot logline is: the knave develops insomnia and stumbles upon a conspiracy to overthrow the king, brewing amidst the night staff of the castle, which is a plot he must infiltrate and neutralize. So I guess I'm not so much trying to focus as much on the story itself as just show examples of the ways that you would fill out a sketchbook, and just the kinds of stuff that you'd want to do in terms of like defining these early dynamics that will be creating those points of conflict throughout the creation of the pilot.
I'm just going quite quick. Sorry, you talk really fast, so I'm trying to keep up.
No problem. I'll try to slow down.
That's all good. Thank you.
So this is just a couple characters. I'm not going to go through and make the whole cast. Go ahead. Another question.
Sure. There's a question from 99 Square on Twitch.
Mhm.
Is it all right to use comps that aren't shows or even movies?
Good question. You should have at least one of your comps needs to be a show. Both of them can't be different things, but one of them can be something else, and that can actually be a nice way to bring a little extra like flavor into it. If you were to say something like, if you were to find things that contrast really starkly, it might draw some curiosity as to how those things could possibly work together, unless they seem totally bizarre. But if we're gonna do, I don't know, it's an office sitcom set in hell, we might say it's The Office meets Doom, and that might kind of like grab people's attention if you pull that off, right? Even though Doom is not a sitcom, right? So yeah, you can do that with one of them. Good question. Thank you. Any others on sketchbooks before I move on from this? Okay, we will continue then. That was just how you might start to be filling out your logline, and I would recommend you be doing that throughout class. Yeah, the sketchbook, I mean. And that was examples of our series and pilot loglines. A reminder on what these things are supposed to do. They're supposed to be the gist of your story, distilled down to just one sentence or two, usually one, though. You want to make sure that we understand what we're going to be watching, what is the inciting incident and the protagonist in that pilot logline, and in the series logline, just a broader overview of everything that's going to be going on in the show. So that's going to be a story engine. The story engine is a combination of factors that basically create conflict and drama throughout a theoretical TV show. So we want to feel like there's enough fuel to burn for future episodes. We want to feel like there's story left to be told after this. So let's look at this template. Where did it go? Okay, so pilot logline is going to look a bit like this. When inciting incident, an adjective protagonist must conflict or else / before stakes. So you can start working on that, some version of that now, even if you have a couple different ideas for them. Maybe we can give you some early feedback and help push you onto the one that you want to stick with. We'll find some time to post those pretty soon, in about 15 minutes. So if you would like to get feedback today, if you feel that you have enough that you would be prepared to receive that feedback, then start typing away on your sketchbooks and figuring out some early versions of your loglines. So let's look at some example series loglines. This is the broader overview. This is something like, a black family man struggles to gain a sense of cultural identity while raising his kids in a predominantly white upper middle class neighborhood. We're describing the types of conflicts that we see all throughout the show. We don't need to specifically lay out goalposts or finish lines for those characters like we would in a movie, because this is going to theoretically go on forever, right? A lot of status quo sitcoms like this can theoretically go for unlimited seasons. If you look at something like The Simpsons or your Family Guy, these things could go on for years. So we want a farther pulled out vision of what the show would be. And this applies to premise shows as well. Look at your Ozark and your Breaking Bad. This Ozark one is just one of my favorites because it acts as such an effective way to answer all the main questions that we have. We have a fast-talking financial advisor, adjective for the main character, drags his family from Chicago to the Missouri Ozarks. Okay, I get where he's from, and I get the different conflicts that would cause when a city boy moves to this very rural area, and that's a unique setting that we haven't really seen explored as much in crime dramas like this before, where he must launder $500 million in 5 years. That's the level of stakes and the scope of the show, and also the time frame that the show is going to take place over. To appease a drug boss. That's telling us who's the antagonist and what are going to be the obstacles that are standing in the way in the course of these episodes. Well, it's going to be getting enough money to keep these drug bosses from murdering the family. So a lot of questions answered in just one single sentence, and this is a series logline that doesn't have to have as specific of points such as $500 million in 5 years. But if you have those things for something like a thriller show like this, that can be really helpful to add that sense of urgency into the premise. So if your show is going to be about, this guy needs to find a way to stop global warming from destroying the world, and he needs to do that by, within 1 year. Then your show might all take place within the span of that 1 year, and you would want to let us know that. We call that the walls or the limitations of the story. And you can see some other examples there, and we have many more that we have looked at in our previous classes before. But that's series loglines. So still try to give us a main character. A series logline shouldn't be something like a group of friends. We should still, if there's any way that you can find one sort of central character to highlight as a story of that journey, because like even a lot of modern sitcoms have one main character that sort of carries the whole thing, or perhaps in some cases a duo of main characters. But like the focus nowadays, even in ensemble sitcoms, is to have an A story. So if you have one, bring it to the forefront and make sure that it is highlighted and it's very clear for us to see what is the focus of the show. A bunch of friends just hang out is barely a premise for a show. We need to have your main character is trying to, even if you're just describing like the sorts of conflicts that they have. Look at the one for Blackish again. It's trying to gain a sense of cultural identity, could describe many different individual conflicts, and you want to have some kind of descriptor that helps us to imagine what those might be. Okay, questions on series loglines?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Is there some software, something that has the outline of everything that you talked about right now, so you almost like fill in the blanks based on some of the headlines that you're telling us?
Yeah, I think that so we have a template for it that we can put in the chat that you could just be able to copy and paste onto a Word document if you want. We can, if that doesn't work for you, we can send you a message with a link to one of them. There's also, you can just review this slideshow. There's a link to it in the chat. So if you go to general chat, click on that word bubble that says open chat, then there's a link here to the slideshow that you can review whenever you want.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions on series loglines? All right, so hopefully we're starting to jot down some ideas for your series logline. Let's look at pilot loglines. So this is going to be more specific. The second logline for the pilot is going to be, let's give us a stronger sense of the time frame that the story takes place within, and it's going to have a more clear and concrete goalpost for the main character. So like gaining a sense of cultural identity does not have a clear and tangible goalpost. What do I mean by that? I mean it's something that we can see and we know the character has accomplished that thing. This is like an internal kind of theme or idea, which you can have in a series logline. But for a pilot logline, you'd want to say something like, give us a specific example of one of those conflicts that you just described. So if it's a guy trying to gain a sense of cultural identity, your pilot logline might be something like, when this family moves into this new neighborhood, there's a big potluck and they're not invited, so now the dad has to find a way, he has to like scheme and outmaneuver people or he has to like outwit the people throwing the party to find a way to get invited there. Something like that. You see, it's just like, his kid's late for soccer practice, so he needs to get her there by this time. We have something that we know for sure when it's accomplished. That's what we mean by a tangible goalpost. So try to have that in the pilot logline, because we're going to want to be able to see the confines and walls of the story just from hearing that logline. And we also like to have the hook be pushed to the forefront of one or the other of these loglines, but we want to know, what is making this show set apart? How is this different from something we've seen before? If we just say the show is, it's like Law & Order, no one's really going to be excited enough to probably even read that, let alone spend $100 million making a whole season of it. So we want to highlight some kind of sense of irony, or some new or different setting, or some interesting different main character that we haven't seen before, or some variation or mashup of familiar elements that we perhaps have not seen brought to the forefront. Like I'm doing it's a Game of Thrones type show, but it's about a court jester is the hook of that show, and we're going to see how a court jester is the one pulling all the strings. The one that looks the most foolish is actually the one who is in charge. That's what the fun and and also the darkly comedic tone and the half-hour pacing and these things are like stuff we haven't really seen in that genre before. So try to have something like that. Try to find some variation to your show. If it don't settle for pitching it as, it's just like NCIS, or it's just like CSI, or it's just like Breaking Bad. You want to you can use that as a starting point, But make sure then you're bringing something that you know well to it. You're bringing something unique to it. Some different mashup of elements, like pick a different age for the main character, a different gender for the main character, different something. Find some way for us to see that story in a new way. That's that element of the familiar mixed with something fresh and unique. And I think in Stephen King's On Writing book, he mentions how you can find ways to use your own expertise in order to make things actually seem more exciting. Think of like if you're a plumber, you're writing sci-fi books, then maybe a book about plumbers on a spaceship could be really cool because you'll be able to bring your own kind of like point of view to that, and you know the kinds of people that are plumbers, and you know the kinds of things that plumbers talk about, and you could really like bring a lot of life to that story. And it's also just something we've never seen. So we've taken something you like and taken something that you know about and combined those things together to try to find some interesting avenue to something slightly original. But again, don't worry way too much if it's not the most original thing ever. We're just trying to get you practicing coming up with stuff that's not exact carbon copies of things that have existed before. We're not writing fan fiction. We're not writing, reboots of stuff. You're still trying to write original material, and just try to finish it, revise it, and move on. So that's what that logline looks like. I'll leave that up for a minute so you guys can just start thinking in these terms. Remember, for that pilot logline, we want that sense of motivation and stakes and urgency, so we know why does your main character have to go on this journey. However big this journey is, even if it's as simple as he's hungry one day, so this episode is about him trying to get a sandwich. That's a fine level of motivation if that's the kind of show this is. The stakes should be as high as they can be for the genre for the most part. I mean, your guy just wants a sandwich does not feel like very high stakes, but maybe could work in a comedy or something like that, or maybe the series of situations escalates so that the stakes in fact grow over the course of that episode. Urgency means some reason why the story has to happen now. This isn't as important as it is in features here, but we should still be understanding what is motivating that main character to go on this adventure that we're about to watch. So this pilot logline does in many ways feel a bit more like a movie logline. Questions about pilot loglines?
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Hi, Kyle. I have a question about the pilot. Does the pilot have a title separate than the name of the series? Like the initial pilot?
Yeah, usually not actually, but I've seen it. I've seen it sometimes. You absolutely don't have to have a title for the pilot besides
I think
just
it's
pilot.
distracting. I really do. I think it's distracting.
Yeah, most of the time it is just pilot, but sometimes it's something clever. Like there's the show, what's it called? Pushing Daisies, which I was just talking about on the server, and Pushing Daisies is about a pie maker. So the first episode is called Pilot, spelled like Pielette. So I don't know. If you have some clever idea of something to do with it, you can. But most of the time, they're just called name of show pilot. Other questions about pilot loglines? All right, so we might do one or two more slides, but then we will post and share loglines that you guys are working on for some early feedback and to get your machinery fired up or whatever as you work on this throughout the rest of the week. So we've taken questions. So let me just do one or two more slides, and then we will do that. So a couple things to be thinking about. The main thing you can focus on right now before anything else is those characters. And that web of characters you saw as I was sort of adding at the beginning. Think of who is in your main character's life. Friends, family, work, colleagues, enemies, and try to be relating everything to your main characters. That's why we call it a web of relationships, because they are connected in some way. So if you have everyone sort of like looping back to your main character whenever possible, you might have like a couple separate webs. If you're like, this show is about, something like The Wire might be, we have this sort of Venn diagram of characters that are on the side of the cops, characters that are on the criminal side, and then that crossover in the middle where we have some that are both. Maybe that would be a good way to sort of organize your map of characters early on, but you're going to want to figure out who your main characters are in your show. How many main characters should you have? Well, very variable. Longer shows have room for more characters. You can have bigger casts, and we can keep track of more people, and we can simply just explore more character stories in a 1 hour rather than half hour. If you're writing a half hour, you can get away with as few as 2 characters. I don't know of any shows that work with just one person, but there are long stretches of some shows that have only one person, and something like even The Last Man on Earth, which is quite a funny comedy from a couple years ago that was on Fox. The first episode has a lot of it. The main character is alone, and it finds ways to make it work. But even then, he's not actually the last person in the world. So we do bring other people in, and I don't know if it's possible to have one. I hope nobody's suggesting having a pilot with just one person in the whole thing. But, two characters can be a show, sure. You have to, and that can, in fact, be quite easy to make and quite, interesting in some ways if you can make that work. But I would say in terms of main cast, 3 to 5 main characters for a half-hour show is going to be your safe zone. More than 5 or 6 is going to start to get really tricky to balance as an ensemble unless you're thinking of writing something as challenging as, like, Community, which has, like, 7 or 8 main characters and then even more directly in the periphery. So, if you're newer at this, limit your number of characters. The more characters you have, the more complex the story gets because, we're normally going to be organizing your plot lines into sort of 2 or 3 main plot lines in a pilot. We're going to have your A story that's going to be based on your main character trying to achieve some kind of goal with obstacles in the way, and that is going to be intersecting with your B story, which is often going to be centered on perhaps the central relationship with your lead, in tangent to the current conflict that the A story is involved with, or it might be something else entirely happening in the world. There's many different ways to do this, but normally we want to see these characters, interacting and bouncing off each other, and the A story can sort of overlap with the B story sometimes. Don't worry way too much about this plotting stuff right now. I guess I'm just still trying to give the overall sense of how we're approaching writing it, outlining and figuring out what is going to occur. And it's really just half an hour to an hour of TV. It's like 30 pages or 60 pages are the choices that we have. So there's really not unlimited room to do what you want. 30 or 60 pages are very short stories. And so when you're in the brainstorming phase, try to limit the number of characters you have to like 3 to 5 main ones, if you can. If there's going to be more than that, your show should probably be an hour long. In addition to that, we have this idea called Blockbuster Moments, which are just going to be these. This is just telling you something to be brainstorming, but these awesome, really cool, heightened scenes that are going to be the ones that people walk away really remembering from the movie, that leave the audience really breathless, really cheering. Just think of something really cool that could only happen in your story, and just be thinking of ideas for what those could, they don't have to even exist in context yet. That's the nice thing. Think of something like that amazing stampede sequence from The Lion King where Mufasa gets murdered by Scar and he falls and gets trampled by these thousands of rampaging beasts. That's a way that we are having, that's the point. The plot events in that scene are Scar murders Mufasa, but the way that it's done, and that could have been done in just 1 second, right? But the way that it builds up to that really amazing climax with the the really visual, incredible stunt. Essentially, I know it's a cartoon, but it's this really different way of seeing a murder happen. Like that's a way that a character could only that's only a way one character could murder another character in the world of The Lion King. Like we wouldn't be able to see a guy get pushed in front of a horde of stampeding beasts in most things. So that I call that a blockbuster moment because it's something that really could only happen in your world. So you got to think like, what are some really awesome things that could only happen in my world? If you're going to be writing a TV show that is about, let's say, I don't know, a teacher who is a sailboat captain. All right, it's a sailboat teacher. So we're going to want to have maybe one of your blockbuster moments might be there's a class going on the sailboat and a big storm washes up over them and the main character has to save everyone from sinking. That could be really cool, really dangerous, really high stakes, really exciting. And it also is something that could only happen in this world, right? A class of people on a boat having to survive as the captain tries to lead them to safety. That is something that fits naturally into the setup that you have and is taking advantage of the premise as you've designed it. So just be thinking of these. You don't have to know where they will go or what they will be yet. I mean, you don't have to have a great idea of how Captain saves the boat from sinking will fit into the story. We're just trying to think of cool stuff that you would like to see in a story like this. Okay, so that's just some more notes and ideas for brainstorming. Hopefully we've been working on your loglines enough that you are almost ready to share these early versions, and be prepared to hear feedback and notes on them. Don't be discouraged by this. I mean, ideas at the early phases will be less developed, and less developed ideas get more notes. So just because you get a bunch of notes on an idea does not mean that it's not a good idea, that you shouldn't do it. And in fact, you should take that as opportunities to improve it and to find a way to make it work. So let's get ready to share some loglines. You can post those in the chat. If you mouse over general chat and click on that word bubble icon, you can paste them in for us. Make sure to include your genre and formats. And we will start giving feedback on a couple of these logline ideas. All right, so while you guys are doing that, I will be getting this ready to paste them up, and we can view them all together and mark them up.
Just a quick reminder, are we doing pilot or series log lines?
Either or, whatever you have. If you have both, post them both. If you just have one, then just post one. So I'll just remind you what to include here. So we have genre. Format would be, like 30-minute status quo versus 1 hour, and premise. So you can do either way. And then we have series, logline, pilot, logline, like that. If you only have a partially filled out entry, that's okay. And post those as soon as you guys are ready, and we can take a look.
Anyone
Well,
have
while we're
trouble
waiting-
finding the place to post?
Yes. Where do we post?
So just click on the show chat or open chat, and you can type the chat channel.
You'll have to mouse over general chat on the left-hand side of your Discord window. Just scroll down to general chat. That's right above where you see all of the icons for our different avatars. So when you mouse over general chat, a small white word bubble will appear. Just click on that, and it should come up on the right side of your screen. I think, Nacho, maybe we should actually, for the next one, have like a close-up diagram of that I can bring up on the... Or wait, do we have a slide for it? We should add a slide for it so I can bring that up so everyone can see how to open the sneaky chat. Yeah, it's not on our current slide. Let us know if you can't find it, though. We can try to tag you in the channel to help you find it. All right, and as soon as we get a logline, then I'm glad to start asking questions and getting that early response that should help you revise this by the end of class.
While we're waiting, I'm sort of interested in talking a little bit about horror on TV, because I think that you do a lot of damage to your world in Horrorland. You kill a lot of people, you bring world-ending threats into the world, you sort of just mess things up. So I wonder if horror kind of has a terminus, at least straight horror, like something like Buffy or Charmed was like these Monster of the Week type shows. But something like American Horror Story, they had to sort of abandon their plot and rework it at the end of every season because they did so much damage to their world. So I'm just sort of interested in what your thoughts are on making a horror series that can have staying power, that can last more than a couple of seasons without killing everyone.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of ways to do this, and if you watch the Scream TV show, they actually really heavily discuss this in the pilot, so it's actually kind of cool to see them, because, this whole Scream thing is we're going to dissect the medium that we're in, or, play around with the tropes of it in some way. So the main characters in Scream talk about how like, they ask this question, how do you have a slasher on TV, right? And the way that they go about it in the show is that they even really build up towards this ending where it seems like one of the main characters is going to get murdered, and then they don't, and the killer just leaves them like a clue or something like that. And so the way that the characters sort of explain how it might work is they describe it like, you can't have the thrills work in the exact same way on TV. It's not going to be a murder a minute, and you have to allow different things to be interesting. So the way that works is you have to like really either deepen the drama between the characters and make it just as good as the horror, and that's always going to be the tricky part, right? It's like the drama has to be good for this to work. But that aside, like by just deepening by writing a better show, basically, is how you do this. I know that sounds ridiculous to say that that's the answer to good writing is write a good show. But by giving us characters we care about and conflicts that matter to us outside of just the horror, that's one of the many tools that you can use for this. There's other tools like the Walking Dead approach, which is just kill people constantly and introduce people constantly. And that might work in certain worlds where you have a high, you might say, turnover rate of the cast. And then you might have the American Horror Story approach is theoretically to make each, I like that sort of theater company style idea where it's like the same cast every season, and every season is like one story, and then we reset the cast as they're new people with different dynamics and different characters that they're playing. And it feels a lot like, old-fashioned theater troupe. I think that's a really fun way to approach it. And then the last way is just more anthological structures to horror in general will allow you to do that well. I mean, if you just are doing stuff like The Terror, where it's going to be, we're doing multiple complete storylines that are just might exist in the same world, but otherwise are separated from each other by proximity or by, years and years of time even. That's another fun way to try it. So something I've even been thinking about, Monica, and something you might want to chew on in some kind of way, is the idea of, I thought, because a while ago I didn't actually get the opportunity, but I really wanted the opportunity to pitch on a Nightmare on Elm Street TV show that was, there were people were pitching on. And my idea of how to do it was, how could you possibly make, Elm Street work on TV? I don't necessarily just want to stretch out one movie to feel like it lasts an entire season. So I thought with horror especially, you might have this unique and interesting opportunity to do every episode is like a movie, and then the next episode is like a sequel to that movie. So we're making like 12 movies, and as such, the premise kind of like changes a little bit in between each episode, and I would want them to feel a little bit more like self-contained movies on their own, so like in episode 4 we go to space, episode 5 is Freddy on a World War II submarine, an episode like we could, and they could be connected, but still I would want them to feel like movie sequels rather than episodes of a show as much. I just thought that'd be a fun, interesting thing that the horror genre specifically would let you do as kind of a wink and a nod at the idea of how crazy and how many sequels that these franchises got. To do a show as a series of sequels just kind of tickled me pink. So there's a new idea for you. Maybe you can do with that what you will, but there's a couple of examples of how I think horror structures can work on TV. All right, does that answer that question, Monica? Anything else to say on that?
Yeah, I mean, I have plenty to say on it. I think you and me could probably talk for an hour about just this kind of thing. But, yeah, I mean, so American Horror Story, I thought they went wrong when they started crossing everything back over into, having the same timeline repeat itself across seasons. I agree with you. I liked the theater troupe element. And your pitch on an Elm Street show, I mean, I don't know if an Elm Street show would work or not. I would watch it anyway just because I'm a fan. But I also think that with that in particular, you could go into whole dreamscapes where they enter this dream world and stay there for 3 episodes and can't get out of it because they can't get out till they beat Freddy. I always feel like, for a series, we're going to go back to part 3, Dream Warriors, and everyone's going to have like an ability, and maybe like you said with Walking Dead, we're going to shed characters as we go. But anyway, I think you've got a log line. Just always enjoy hearing what you have to say on these subjects.
Sure, thanks, Monica. I appreciate the inputs. And if you want to, Monica, you want to plug your club?
Yeah, let's plug my club. Every Tuesday night at 6 o'clock Pacific, 8 Central, we do a horror club. I bring in a theme every week. We talk about, the movies and the things that we've been reading about. We read a script every week, an excerpt of a script, not a whole movie. And then we do writing exercises, so it's a lot of fun. I hope it's productive. And yeah, show up, horror club. We do all things horror. You don't have to be a big fan of the genre. We hope to share the love. So yeah, come on down.
Was that Tuesdays at 6 Pacific?
Yeah, 6 Pacific, 8 Central.
Got it. All right, thanks for that. Check that out, everyone. Let's look at some log lines. So we've got a couple. Thank you to everyone who's posted so far. Let's start with Miss MC Casey. I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure how to say it, but why don't you go ahead and unmute and tell us about your idea? MC Casey, is that right? Can you hear us, Casey? So there's a chance that you might be on push-to-talk mode, perhaps. You can click the gear icon, user settings, in the bottom left corner of your Discord screen, and go to voice and video to check to see if that's the case. I'll come back and call on you again in a few and try to... Oh, I see your mic is unmuting, so I think you might just be trying to get the mic to work. I'll come back to you in a minute, and we'll try again. Let's go to Braith.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay.
Can you read out your idea for us,
well,
please?
I guess. Yes. Let me just read what's on the page right there.
Go ahead.
As Alice arrives at the city Greyhound terminal, she was an open target for sympathy and deceit. Alice was a young 21-year-old who was leaving the South for the first time in her life, with only $65 in her pocket, which her grandmother had given her for the trip. She was not prepared for what the city had in store for her, so you may think.
All right, thanks for this. So this is a half-hour drama series. Okay. So a couple things. So for one, a logline is going to be in, and generally with screenwriting in general, like almost all the time we want to be writing in present tense, just because that's how the scripts work. This feels a little like it was from how we might write this in a book. Which is, it's okay to have this as, notes material to draw from. But for a logline, keep this in present tense. So we would say, Alice arrives. We wouldn't say, like, she was an open target. You'd say that she is an open target. So that would be the way to just think of the most of what we're doing here. But let's put together a logline using our sort of format. So our pilot logline for this, we're going to use this sort of format of when inciting incidents. So we have, tell us, who is Alice? How would you describe her? Is she, a 50-year-old widow? Is she an 18-year-old college student? Just who is she in a couple words?
Alice is a young 19-year-old coming from down south, where she's been involved with men and, fast life, but now coming to the city trying to gain an establishment and build herself up.
Okay, and what's her motivation to leave? Is it because she is just looking for more opportunities, or is she like afraid of someone back home, or what is her motivation for making this big change?
For greater opportunities.
Okay, fair enough. But so like normally we're looking for some kind of inciting incident. Like, is there one thing that made her feel like I have to go now? Like, did she graduate college? You see what I mean? Like, did she lose her previous home? Was there something that it's okay if you don't have an answer to this right now, but just be thinking, like, what is the catalyst to cause the story to happen?
Well, in the story, as the story will go on, we'll find out why she really left home. So in the beginning, I didn't want to say the reason why she would leave home, but you will see that when she gets out of where she is, she turns from what she was into a whole new life of adventure and challenges.
Okay, so I think that it's a good idea to at least, even if the way that it unfolds in the episode is like it's left a little bit more as a mystery at first, why she's doing this, we would still, I'm just going to give you an example, and you don't have to use this exact thing, but I'm just going to say something like, when her house burns down, a down on her luck, southern, or we might say Alabama teenager, hitches a ride to what's the big city that she's going to? It doesn't say here. I'm just gonna pick a city, and you don't have to use any of this. This is just like the form. This is what a logline might look like for this. So she hitches a ride to Chicago, and tries to make it big in the fashion industry. So do you see how I've just sort of framed a little bit more specifically what she's going to be doing and why?
Yes.
Okay, so try to rework this a little bit in that format, and try to boil it down to just one clear sentence like this. Again, you don't have to use the fashion industry or any of these silly things. Use whatever your own specific vision of this is, but just try to get it to sound a bit like this. And I'll check again by the end of class if you want more pointers on it.
Okay, it could be. You made me think. It could be after the death of her grandmother.
That's
Something
good.
on that order.
Yeah, a death is always a big that's a good motivation for a big change. Okay, so lots to think about there. Start molding and shaping that, and post an update by the end of class, and we'll give you an update on that too, or we'll give you the feedback on that too. Thank you for this. All right, let me check again with Miss MC Casey. Casey, are you with us? I'm not hearing a mic if you're speaking. I saw your mic icon unmute, and I'm just not hearing you speaking, so there might be just an issue with your mic. If you're using a computer, I might recommend trying to download the app on your phone. That typically works a little bit better, and it you just talk into it, and it's pretty easy to do. Let us know if you need any help with that. We'll try to make sure we hear from you today. I'll check back later. Let me check who we have next. G-Man.
All right. So I'm kind of going against the grain here. So my series, I talked about this a couple days ago in screenwriting chat, but my series is called Agatha. Working title. That's just the protagonist's name. It is a 30-minute episodic, so like a 30-minute drama, not a 30-minute sitcom or comedy. The genre is, I'm thinking horror action right now, but I might want to lead more towards like horror mystery and keep the action to like a minimum to play more into the horror, because I don't want to like lean into Resident Evil territory here. And then my series logline is an introverted teen possessed by a demon must defend her hometown from monsters before her humanity crumbles away.
Nice. I wrote a show a bit like this a couple years ago called Clementine. That was about two teenage girls in the 50s, and one of them has a sort of genetic like line of demons in her family, his blood or something like that. It was years ago. I actually got an 8 on it on the blacklist, but it never went anywhere. Anyway, so believe me, you're well in the territory that I am familiar with, and I like all this stuff. So I'm with you here for most of this. I think that we're tripping up a little bit on something in this, which is you're saying. So it sounds like you're gonna give us a ticking clock on this demonic or monster invasion. You're saying she must defend her hometown from monsters before her humanity crumbles away. But I think really you're saying her humanity crumbling away is like a factor that's going to complicate her defending the town from monsters, right? I think you're probably going to want to say something like an introverted teen struggles to maintain her humanity as she tries to defend her hometown from monsters who are going to destroy it in 3 weeks. You know what I mean? Something like that that's going to clarify, like, why does she have to do this? You've just given us a factor that is going to be making her doing this more difficult, and perhaps is going to be at the theme, like, in the heart of the character's journey. But I'd want to know, like, why is it, what's actually going on in the world, and what's going to be the scope for this whole thing, right? Is it like there's a demonic, what is going on exactly in the world of this, if you know?
I don't have a ton of details so far, but the idea is that this is kind of a remote, isolated town in like rural Canada. So it's cold, surrounded by woods, a very isolated location, and in those woods is obviously a malevolent supernatural force.
Okay.
Some kind of I haven't specified a religion that I'm basing this off of yet, but some kind of demonic entity lurks out there, and it is possessing people, turning them into monsters. But because Agatha, the main character, what I'm leaning towards is because of some reason that I haven't gotten to yet, she is able to control the evil within her, and instead use that against the demonic entity out in the woods.
Okay.
But
so
obviously she doesn't have total control over it because her humanity is crumbling away.
Okay. So is it that she's like keeping it captive?
Yeah, it's what's a
Like it
What's
tried
it
to possess her, and
called?
now it's inside her, and she's like, now I control you and use you to give me superpowers, basically.
yeah, kind of like Venom
I
and
see.
Spider-Man.
That's very cool, but that dynamic sounds really interesting, and like you should highlight that a little more. It's not just that she's possessed by a demon in that case. This is an introverted teen keeping a demon prisoner within her and using it for power. So that's going to tell us that a lot of the hook of the show is going to be her adversarial relationship. Yeah, you're right. Like, it's very much like Venom, or like the anime called Parasite, or something like that, where we have a somewhat adversarial relationship with the symbiotic creature that's giving you powers, right?
Yeah.
So I would bring that to the forefront because that's going to give us a better idea of the conflict that we're going to see through the show. And also, just I think is that the central relationship? That is, right?
That is going to be kind of the central relationship. There's gonna be some introversion and stuff going on there.
Meaning it's like her only friend, basically.
I'm thinking like the demon inside her can like see into her mind and like just constantly berates her because she's an introvert. She's obviously got issues, and so there's going to be a lot of conflict going on there.
Okay, I can see that. Yeah, and that's why I'm double checking to make sure that is the central relationship. Like the demon is going to be a fully realized character that's going to have its own sort of desires and things like that. Because if we only have one character, like you want to have at least one other important character mentioned in most TV loglines. And so if it was going to be like this girl and her best friend, or this girl and her former bully, or someone like that was going to be really key to the story too, you'd want to make sure to bring them to the forefront. But if you are saying her and the demon are sort of like your central duo, like we could lose every other character in the show, premise would remain intact, then this is working pretty well. Just I would reframe it with that dynamic clarified the way that I explained a minute ago.
Gotcha. I do have a couple other characters in mind because like the hometown, there's people there. We need to be attached to some people, so we care that she's defending the town, but I haven't narrowed those down yet.
Cool. Yeah, I like that this is half hour. I mean, it almost feels like Gravity Falls a little bit, but it's like this is the serious adult kind of take on the like small town mystery with it's like this. It's kind of like Buffy, but I think you mean it's a little more serious, right?
Yeah. But this would be like American Horror Story, Penny Dreadful level horror and violence.
Great. That sounds awesome. I would totally watch this. So I hope that you read this. Any last questions on this? All right, thanks, G-Man.
Cool. No problem.
Let's do a couple more. Do we have anyone who I have had to skip over for technical reasons? And if they want to chime in now, I can call on you.
I think Miss MC Casey, your mic is working okay now. Is that right?
Yes, can you hear me?
I hear you now. Go right ahead.
Okay, cool. So my logline is a grumpy talent agent struggles to transition back to her old farm life when one of her LA clients goes viral.
I like that. Let's take a look. Format, half hour. Oh, it's premise. Okay, so.
And the genre's comedy.
Yeah. A grumpy talent agent. Do you have comps for this too?
I haven't thought of comps yet, but I would say something like one thing that's similar is like The Fool on Hulu, just because of the fact that like he's working at a job that he's kind of shitty at his old age. But I can't really think of something at the top of my head at the moment.
Okay. I see the basic show, I think. Do you see this as more of a premise-based show or a status quo-based show? Meaning, like, is there a lot of continuity between the episodes and you want to do longer story arcs, like something like, Barry? Or is this going to be more like a traditional sitcom?
More like a traditional sitcom.
Okay. My question for you is, to what extent? So, I guess, what is the premise of this beyond we have LA talent agent trying to adjust on farm life? I mean, like you say, one of the clients went viral. Does that mean you're saying that client will still be in the show somehow, or that elements of LA life will still be, like, she's trying to maintain some elements of her career back home? Or can you clarify that a little bit?
Yeah, so basically, it's more so that LA will still be the main setting. Like, she was going to move back to her farm and go back to her old farm life, but when one of her clients goes viral, she's kind of like in this dilemma of, do I stay here to help my client or do I leave? And she keeps trying every episode to find a way out of LA, but something keeps bringing her back to LA, whether it's the same client or a scandal. So it's just one of those type of premises, if that makes sense.
I guess I may have misunderstood that you're saying this does primarily take place in LA. I thought from the description that you were saying this primarily takes place on a farm. So when you say she struggles to transition back to her old farm life, what my mind goes to is struggles to transition while she's there, right? I think you're saying she's struggling to make the move back to her old farm life. Okay.
Yes.
So I guess if that's the premise of the show, then what is it that she's doing? Is it she's trying to fix the publicity of her top client or something like that?
Yes.
She is. Okay. So I think that the farm stuff sounds not super relevant to the main. If you're saying that's like the something that she's not actually going to spend that much time doing, then maybe the show is more something like a grumpy talent agent struggles to keep a lid on a client that's going crazy, right? Or client that's acting up or had this terrible PR or something like that, right?
Okay, that makes sense.
Because I was intrigued by the farm idea. I was like, but I think it was just making me paint the wrong picture. And if that's not going to be the focus of the story, then using more words on it might just mislead the audience or the reader a little bit to seeing the wrong thing. So yeah, this sounds like this is an LA focused show about a talent agent who's struggling to maybe, this is almost like BoJack Horseman or something like that, I guess might be one of your comps, right?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe you can put that down. Yeah, that's a good show that takes place sort of within the entertainment industry in LA, and that's a half-hour comedy as well. So, is this the central relationship of the show, the client and the talent agent?
Yes.
It is. Okay. So in that case, I would in revising this to take away the focus from the farm thing and to focus more on the people involved. You might actually want to say, like, highlight their dynamic a bit more, or like if they are incredibly codependent on each other, if they are always butting heads with each other. See what I mean? Like, just clarify what are those two people like, because if that's the focus of your show, then we're going to want to know that at the forefront, and we're going to want to see those two characters in our minds as we envision the rest of it. And also, when you say the client goes viral, you may have a room to just specify in what way the client went viral. That might just give us a sense of the kinds of antics that we're going to be getting up to in the show. Because if it's like the client goes viral for a sex tape leaks, that's going to be a different vibe than they went viral because, I don't know, why do people go viral? Because they say something racist online, you know what I mean? So maybe just find some way of telling us just what that event is. If that feels like it might get us into seeing the sense of humor in the show a little more, it might be useful to just bring that up front too.
Okay, that makes sense.
Cool. Any questions on this? Or questions from anyone? Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm good on questions.
Cool. Premise highlights central relationship to emphasize the hook. Okay. Thanks for this. That sounds cool. I would definitely watch that one as well. That sounds like something that would be on Hulu to me. I think we have a couple more. Let's see. Anyone else that I've not gotten to? Samsog, you have a horror drama for us. That's one of my favorite genres. Are you able to unmute? It is pretty quiet, but let me just turn up your volume. Okay, try now.
Is that any better?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Mine is basically you're talking about a comp, it's a, sort of a quantum leap type thing.
Okay.
It's based more on horror because he has to travel through time to help people fight their demons. So Edison, when he invulged against the light bulb, he's fighting a demon for those 1,000 times he invented that light bulb. So on and so forth. Those are the type of ideas that I have from different episodes. But the pilot is actually where he has to fight his own demons so he can become a actual great journalist. And his demons are caused because of his younger brother's death by drowning.
Okay. Can you read out the log lines for us?
Yes. The average journalist with Spidey spheres have managed to infest it as demons that keep him mediocre to overcome the life he lives. Series logline is he travels through time to help the builders, inventors, and writers of the past and future to help them fight their demons and fears.
Okay. So, a couple things about this. I like the idea of like a horror type quantum leap is very cool, but it sounds a little bit to me like the pilot story is not going to really be representative of the rest of the episodes. Is that right?
Oh, it is, because he's had to overcome his demons and fight them. Now he's traveling through time because he's gained the power of the demon to travel through time.
But
help
so he
others
gets that
fight
at the
their
end
demons.
of the episode, you're saying?
What was that?
But he gets that power at the end of the episode?
Yeah, at the end of the pilot.
But do you see how your time traveling show has your main character not time traveling in the pilot?
Yes, at the very first, it happens more during the fight with his demons. They're trying to scare him. So he does time travel, but he ends up back in his own time at the end and figures out, hey, I can now time travel to go help other people.
Okay, but he's not helping. But he's not doing that in the pilot. He's not jumping around helping other people the way that every other episode
He's
of the
not
show
helping them
theoretically
in the
would be,
pilot.
right?
We're setting up. I think he's trying to set up. It's trying to set up the premise that he's fighting his demons, and now he's learned how to fight those demons to help the other people.
I see what you mean, but almost always you're going to want your first episode to, just because we can't imagine we're going to get more episodes, you have to actually do the thing that is a sample of the show within the pilot. So I like the idea of your main character has to learn to conquer his own demons before he can effectively help others. But if you can also, if he can do that while still helping someone else, like if we can just give us a pilot episode that maybe would be showing the potential of what the series could be, right? Because we're going to want to see how the time travel works. We're going to want to see your main character using that and exploring this idea of what like this sounds like the kind of promise of your premise. So my suggestion is going to be to not have the first episode fundamentally be about something different or have it be operating on very different rules than the rest of the show would be. I know sometimes we do see that on TV. Think, for instance, I don't know, Band of Brothers or a war show. The first episode is going to be there in boot camp, and the rest of the episodes are going to be there at war. And we need that first episode is really great to have because we're getting them into position to go to boot camp and to go to the war, and we're like meeting these people early on. We're setting up the premise, but like we just can't assume that we're going to get the rest of those episodes that those shows would have. So it's not going to be satisfying for the reader in the same way, and it won't feel like this is a sample of I just don't feel it's the strongest idea for a pilot to focus on completely different action than we're going to be watching for what the rest of the show might contain. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, but I do like the basics of this. I think this does sound cool. I might when you're describing your character, you usually want to avoid using the word average. Just because I think I know why you're saying it is because you're saying this is a journalist with no experience in fighting monsters, or he won't have any expertise to do this. But in that case, I would pick something else rather than average. If you want to say, I don't know, even like nerdy is an example of, okay, this is why it still answers that question of this is why it would be particularly difficult for this person to do this task or this quest. But it also does tell us about his personality and the things that he's into and things like that. So maybe you could just find a slightly more descriptive word to tell us about that main character. keep him mediocre to overcome the life he lives. Yeah, and for the rest of this, I would just consider, you don't absolutely have to do any of this, but I would just reconsider maybe if the show is going to be every episode he travels to help a new person, pilot episode should also be he travels somewhere to help a person, even if that contains that through line of him struggling with his own, internal demons or whatever he has. Questions on this?
No.
Okay, great. Questions from anyone else? Thank you so much, Samsog. Let's look at Gary's logline for the list.
You want me to read it?
Go ahead.
Read it off the screen. Okay, when logline for the series The List. When the prisons are empty to fight a new civil war, 2 AWOL convicts track down and exact revenge on a list of psychopaths before they hurt more children.
Okay, so 60 minutes, crime action, logline. Okay, for the series. When prisons are emptied, I think we can just say prisons. When not the prisons. The prisons makes me think I have to know which prisons you're talking about. When
Okay,
prisons
very
are
good.
emptied to fight a new civil war, as in like turning them into penal battalions and forcing them to be conscripted onto
Right,
different
right.
sides. Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. 2 AWOL convicts track down and exact revenge on a list of psychopaths before they hurt more children. I guess, this does sound unique. I like the setting of the kind of modern day war and the AWOL convicts. It almost reminds me of something like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Did you ever see that? About the Coen Brothers movie about the chain gang that escapes to go and search for treasure.
No. But yeah.
That's a cool movie, but so I like the character setup. You saying they're exacting revenge though makes me feel like they have some kind of personal connection to this list of villains though. Is that the case?
See, that's like the pilot. Instead of that's the series, but in the pilot, he has his own child, and in the pilot there's 2 convicts, and they work together. One's a Mo and one's a Brain, and bad things happen to their children, and that gives them the rationale to create this desire for revenge.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean. So I think you're saying they're going to exact a revenge on a list of psychopaths who hurt their children.
Find this list, CIA list. But see, the problem I'm having in the pilot is like something you just said. The pilot has to contain one person who has revenge exacted on him. Because how I have it in my head, the pilot, the revenge doesn't happen till the second one. So what I have to do is rewrite it so the actual revenge happens in the pilot as well. Because there might not be a second or third.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And that's why I'm having a hard time writing the log line, because I'm trying to, I just have to say in the log line that one of them gets revenge. All right, very good. Actually, it's going to make it easier to write.
I think so. Yeah, I think having that structure built in, it tells you what your premise scenes are going to be.
Cut some of it out though, because I got 60 pages now, so I guess I got to cut something of it out. But see, I'm confused. Okay, in the pilot, you have to spell out all the characters and the scenarios that will generate future shows, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't, you can't go to a second or third episode and start introducing characters that were never pivotal or primal in the first one. So you got only 60 pages to introduce all these characters and make all this stuff happen. You're gonna do a lot of chopping. It's a different kind of game rather than a feature.
Yeah, it's tough. I think you're starting. Yeah, you're definitely seeing the challenge of this. Pilots are not easy to write, and even professionals really struggle to do everything they need to do in a pilot. And sometimes a show will drastically change direction after the pilot, and they'll have to kind of make just that. That's why pilots just have a bad reputation for not turning out that well. It's really hard to make a good one. So you got to just do your best and just got to write a bunch of them in order to get the bad ones out of the way and build your skills in juggling all these different plates that you need to juggle during the show. But yeah, try to introduce all your main characters.
I had another question to ask you. We had a conversation before the other day. Since it's a pilot and it's really meant to show your expertise or your abilities or your style, can you deviate from the social norms and touch on things which may be a little bit taboo or maybe a little bit makes people uneasy? Because in the event of things, if it's well written, maybe they'll discount that and not have to take it to heart that some of the subject matter might be a little bit racy or
I mean, you can try anything you want, but if you lose people, you lose people, and like there's just certain stuff that will make certain readers. If something just makes someone ill to their stomach, then we can't make them keep reading.
It's never that. It's never that. But
well, okay. So just in terms of controversial stuff or like taboo stuff in general, if somebody is offended by something they read enough that they stop reading, we can't know if that's going to happen or not. We just have to accept that that's part of the cost of writing stuff that is really edgy. Is that sometimes it will have less opportunities because less people will respond to that material. So that's always going to be a balance that you have to keep in mind. Like, how much do I want to try to push the envelope of any kind of envelope versus how much do I want to make sure that the reader gets all the way through this and it starts my career, So it's a challenge.
Could you put a few I've never read a pilot before.
Oh, you got
maybe you could put one or two in the side, and then I'll download it. It'll give me something to read. Maybe a horror pilot, so I can read it for our friend's horror show on Tuesday.
Sure. Yeah, we have a great link for you. We'll have lots of pilots for you to read. I recommend you read Servants. Right, cool. That's a great horror pilot.
Servants? Okay.
Yeah, it's cool.
At least to get an idea how they're actually written. What do they look like? How much prose? It's a lot of economy of language. But how do you maintain all the white on the page? You still have to have a lot of white on the page, though.
Sure. Yes, you do. I would read 3 of them a week and try to maybe take notes on things that you notice. That's what I do when I read. I'm always like writing stuff down and really trying to fully burn it into my brain as I'm doing it. So we have a link that you can use to read, and everyone in the class should in fact be reading at minimum 1 script a week. But I say 3 scripts a week is about what you should be aiming for. A 30-page script does not take that long to read, so you can definitely find some time.
Sure, they'll move faster. Yeah, they're easier to read.
Very quick. You read it in one sitting.
Yeah.
All
right, very good.
We'll have a link for you.
Thanks for the advice.
Sure. Thank you for the
great advice. Yeah.
All right. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more, or it looks like we may have some updates. We have one from Paul, and then we will look at this updated one at the bottom here. Are you there, Paul?
Yeah. So it is. This is, I guess, for the first episode. When a rebellious teen gets the job working concessions at the state fair, they must work with other employees to survive a sudden zombie outbreak. It's sort of like a comedy horror type thing.
Okay, is this the pilot or series logline?
This is the pilot one.
Okay, pilot logline. So what would, just off the top of your head, what would the premise of the show then be? Is it gonna be teenagers surviving in the zombie wasteland like Zombieland, or is it gonna be they continue to run the park, or what exactly is the premise of the show then if this is the pilot?
Well, that's the thing. I didn't really know. I just thought of like an idea for I guess the pilot. I couldn't come up with anything for an entire show. Is like a problem for me.
Yeah, because I guess this right now it sounds like sort of a short film, right? But that's the difference between a short film and a pilot, is that a show feels like it has more legs to keep going, or more tarmac for the plane to run on after the first episode is done. So before I would start working on this, I think you do have to have a clearer picture of what you're setting up. So you're going to have to, because we have to imagine there's episode 2 picks up after this is done. So where are the characters at now, and how would I describe what they're doing from episode to episode? So maybe, do you have a genre for this? Is this, you said horror comedy?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have a title?
No, I couldn't come up with one.
That's okay. All right. So the title might help clarify the premise a little bit. So I'd start trying to nail down on what is the hook of this show. And I think you want to make this not just like Zombieland, I would guess, right? Have you seen those movies?
Yeah, I saw them a long time ago.
Okay, but so just pick a dynamic that's not just like that. I would ask yourself, do you want to have the whole show take place at this state fair? Maybe that's kind of a fun hook. I mean, think of if they, if we're in a world where, so did you, I mean, if you saw Shaun of the Dead, there's a great ending sequence where it sort of shows how life is going on after the zombie apocalypse is done. Like there's a bunch of zombies that are now being made spectacle of into the zoo, or like they're using them as entertainment on TV. And maybe like in a world where that's happening, we're in a state fair where they're keeping zombies as attractions, right? So maybe just start to think of how can I use the pieces I have to create the hook and premise for like a foundation for a show, rather than just this is going to be a 30-minute short film that might be an episode of like Love, Death, and Robots or something.
Thank you.
Sure. Any question or any way that I can help out with that, or any ideas that spring to your mind right away in terms of a hook?
Just like a random thought I had, or like maybe it could be like some like weird monster of the week type thing where something strange happens at the place every episode. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Maybe it's like if it's going to be sort of more of a status quo, this could almost be an animated version of this. But if there's going to be some spooky supernatural event that happens every week, then the employees of this one state fair or carnival or whatever have to find a way to stop it and keep things running, or defeat this is like Courage the Cowardly Dog almost. I love that. I think that you should do some thinking on that and think of what is the thing that we'd like to see more of week by week. And so you can't kill all your characters, right? So we have to imagine it's going to be the same people, but just imagine, but just start brainstorming. What would I like to see people? What have we not seen really people do on TV or in a movie like this before? I think we've seen a lot of shows where they just end up wandering the wilderness, like Walking Dead, and all these things where it's just every week we wander to a new place and try to survive. So I would avoid that and try to find something fun for a horror comedy, especially. We want something that makes the audience kind of laugh. So if you have the employees of a state fair and must defend it from supernatural threats, I think that's enough that makes me kind of laugh.
Yeah, I'll do more thinking on that for sure.
Cool. There's definitely something here, so just drill down a little deeper. You'll find the premise a little clearer, and maybe highlight the central relationship and see if that helps, because that can often be the hook. Okay, I think we might have room for just one more if there's one more, and then we will have to wrap up for today. Let me see if there's any that I haven't gotten to. And it might be just an update of an earlier one, it looks like. Okay. Nacho also has posted a ton of pilots to the chat, so you should definitely pick a couple of those to read, including the one for Servant, which I mentioned to Gary just a moment ago. So in the general chat, click on one of these if you're looking for something interesting, and you can find these. But you can also find way more. We have a link to a pilot depository website that has a ton of them on there. If somebody could drop the link to that in the chat, that would be great. It's like a TV writing Google group. And there's plenty of options, so you should read at least one script every single week. You're not going to be able to write pilots unless you are reading pilots. Let's look at the update for... I forget the name of the show. The show about Alice. Do you, Braith? Are you back with us?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. So, can you read the new version for us, or the updated logline?
Okay. As Alice arrives at the city Greyhound terminal, she's an open target for sympathy and deceit. Alice is a young 21-year-old and for the first time in her life has left the South after the passing of her grandmother. With only $65 in her pocket, which her grandmother had given to her as she laid on her deathbed, Alice is not prepared for her trip to a big new city and what it will have in store for her. So you may think.
Okay, nice job. You've taken some of the sentences out and we've reduced the words. I think your challenge is going to be reducing words to just one sentence. So a logline should just be one sentence. It's tough to do, and sometimes they have to be kind of a long sentence. And I know this is kind of annoying to keep having to rework this down more and more. But by next class, just spend this week trying to find one sentence that cuts to the heart of what this is, and you only want to include the most relevant information. So we might want to say something. I'm just going to give you an example. You don't have to do this, but we might say something like, The death of her grandmother sends a naive 21-year-old on a trip to the big city where she must, struggle with addiction and the brutal bartender industry. See what I mean? I'm just giving like 2 examples of the kinds of stuff that she has to struggle with. So try to find just one sentence like that. We don't necessarily need to know every single thing that leads up to the events of the show happening. Like the $65 in her pocket is a nice detail for the show itself, but it might not really fit in a logline just because it's like we just need to cut a lot of words here. So the basic pieces of this are: inciting incident is the death of her grandmother. A 21-year-old goes from the rural south to the rural south to the big city, and then we want to know, what does she have to do there? Like, what is she trying to accomplish there? Basically, that's all that's going to fit into one sentence. And if you have a central relationship, maybe in drama especially, it's really nice to be able to mention that the grandmother is going to be dead in the show, so I imagine that's not like the person she's think of who is she interacting with most, right? Is it a new best friend? Is it a new relationship? Is it does she move there with somebody that she knows? Does she form a rivalry with someone? So maybe if you can figure out a way to include that one other character in the sentence, then it will clarify the show a little bit. But don't worry way too much about that. I would just try to focus on boiling this down to those essentials in that one single sentence.
Okay.
Questions on that? No questions? All right, thank you so much for sharing. So for next week, we want to just work on your logline, both for the pilot and for the series, and do as much as you can there so that we can try to get going on the outline of your show next week. So if you've not yet decided on your idea for sure, you definitely want to do that, and try to finalize those series and pilot loglines by next time. In addition, you're going to be filling out your sketchbooks. Remember, we went over all the kinds of stuff you want to add in there today, but mostly be focusing on web of character relationships and dynamics at the beginning. And then you're going to want to read at least one pilot through and through, front to back, and be ready to talk about it for next week. There's not a quiz. I'm just going to ask you things like, what did you think? What did you learn? You just want to be ready to speak on a pilot that you read, even in just, you don't have to write an essay or anything, but just read it and pay attention. That's all you have to do. And be reading at least one pilot script every week. If you're not reading, there's no way you're going to be writing competent pilots. So, any last questions before we close things off for today? Thank you so much for being here, everyone. Really glad to have
you. Said there's going to be a link put up for pilot.
Yeah, so go to our general chat and click on open chat. And if you scroll up just a little bit, you'll see, I'll pin it to the channel too, but there's a link called sites, google.com/TV writing. I'll send it to you in a message so you'll get it.
Okay.
And if you're planning to join the bootcamp, be sure to vote yes in the chat so you can get access to all the bootcamp channels. And there's a link there as well where you can sign up on the website. If you haven't enrolled yet, but you plan to join, just be sure to click the yes button. I think Samsung means yes for planning to join. Okay, awesome. That works.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, we'll be glad to have you guys, and we hope to see you sign up for this. Your free trial will include 2 weeks, so that's as many. You can, in the free trial, you can go to other classes and workshops and meetups too, so make sure to really explore everything that we have here. We have lots of great stuff for you guys to check out. Thanks, folks. Oh, last questions about the course or what to do for next week before we close out for today?
Will you be sending any other emails?
I think when you sign up, you get a welcome email that has some of the basic information on it. Anything else they get, Nacho?
Yeah, so Dubraith, maybe you had trouble finding the text channel, but were you planning to, if you're planning to enroll but you haven't signed up yet, just let me know and we can go ahead and you access and we'll follow up to help you get set up on the website. If that is that the case, you plan to enroll?
I'm deciding now.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Sure. Yeah. There will be info, like lots of classes. It's about there's 70 hours of classes available. You don't have to go to all of them, but there's also like on the website, there's a video library with all the previous classes. And you also have access to the writer's lab on Saturday. So you can bring all of your questions for Connor or get help with your outline or problems you're having with your project. You can bring it to the writer's lab every Saturday. All that's included in the membership.
Thanks, Nacho. But no, we don't send lots of spam emails or anything. If you're concerned about that, but we do send periodic updates, and that just have lists of the upcoming classes. You can unsubscribe from the emails though. Other questions before we say goodnight?
And just to make sure, Miss MKC and Samsung, you should be able to see the bootcamp channels now. Just let us know if you have any difficulty.
I think they are not in the. Oh well, one of them is here. Okay, but yeah, hopefully they are able to find that. All right, we're going to say goodnight to everyone. We hope to see you all for this next bootcamp meeting next week. So in the meantime, work on that sketchbook, refine that logline, and be ready to proceed into structure next week. It'll be same time, so Friday 5 to 7 for the next 6 weeks. Hope to see you guys there. Have a great rest of your nights.